I call the Honourable Member Grant Robertson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It was interesting to hear that Minister refer to Cicero. Presumably that's the Cicero who was the author of the book Riley the Rat that the former Minister of Education read to the PPTA. But remarkably enough, she was actually a better Minister of Education than Heke Parata. It's absolutely incredible. I didn't think I would ever say those words in the House, Mr. Speaker, but it is true. Mr. Speaker, we have seen the worst anti-education budget that I can remember from this government. It comes from a party that simply does not understand education. They don't understand how the education system works, and they are driven by a mentality when it comes to education where they see the cost of everything and the value of nothing. Overall, this is a budget, Mr. Speaker, without vision for sustainable growth and without hope to ensure that a new generation want to build their lives for them and their families in our country. Mr. Speaker, the government said it wanted this budget to be boring. Being boring is no aim, but more than that, being boring in the way the national government are doing it is damaging. It is damaging to New Zealand because there are such big issues that this country has to face. Being boring in the way the national government say it is neglect. It is neglect of the future of this country. But this budget, Mr. Speaker, is not actually boring when it comes to education. Right through from early childhood education to tertiary education, this budget is the worst budget for education that I can remember. This is a budget from an anti-education party that simply does not understand the education system. It starts right at the early childhood education level, a sector still reeling from having $400 million ripped out of it in the 2010 budget, which pushed the costs for many families up by $60, $80 a week to have their children in early childhood education. That was the record from the 2010 budget. Now we see a freeze on the funding for those centres. That will see the costs for parents with children in early childhood education go up once again. And how many times, Mr. Speaker, do we have to tell this government that investment in early childhood education pays off again and again in later life? Every dollar put in, $10 or $11 back. But this government ignores that evidence time and time again, freezes the funding and makes sure that parents will have to pay more. Parents already under financial pressure, Mr. Speaker, will have to pay more in early childhood education. But, Mr. Speaker, it's in the compulsory sector that this budget really fails the future of New Zealand. Much has been said already in this House about the failure of this government in the compulsory sector. But there is so much to say, but the real story is the fundamental flaw in the assumption that the Minister of Education and John Key are making, and that is funding education is a zero-sum game. If we want to keep class sizes reasonable, we have to give up on teacher quality. That's the assumption from this government. That's what they see this. Well, I've got a message for John Key and Heke Parata. Our children's future is not something to be traded off. It's not one commodity to be traded off against another commodity. Of course we want good quality teachers in front of classrooms. That's why Labor invested heavily in professional development. The national government came in and took money out of professional development for teachers and now tries to celebrate this year, Mr. Speaker, that they brought some of that money back again. It is not a zero-sum game, Mr. Speaker. We can have quality teachers and keep class sizes at a reasonable level if this government is prepared to actually prioritise education. Class size increase is a deliberate policy by this government. New Zealanders should make no mistake about that. New Zealanders should make no mistake, parents right across New Zealand, this national government is deliberately increasing the size of classes, and we know from evidence right around the world the impact that will have. We know that John Key and Bill English know that. In 2004, Bill English said it. He said that increasing class sizes will cause trouble in classrooms, and especially for children who are already disadvantaged. Yet that is exactly what this government is doing, Mr. Speaker. This government is increasing class sizes and disadvantaging students. We've already heard a lot about technology teaching. And I just want to make the point that was already made in question time today. There are people who attend schools that are not intermediate schools, Mr. Speaker. These are schools that go from years 1 to 8. Students who perhaps might be at a school like Wellington Girls College previously have been in Wellington to schools that go from years 1 to 8. When they go to get their technology classes, Mr. Speaker, they go and do that at a primary school that offers that. We have heard today from Mount Cook School here in Wellington that as a result of the changes this government is making, that will reduce funding in most of the schools that contribute students to that technology centre at Mount Cook School, that they will have to close that centre if the government does not change its priorities. They will have to close that technology centre. 5 teachers will lose their jobs, and many of those students will lose the opportunity to learn the skills that they learn in technology classes. Mr. Speaker, John Key received an email yesterday from a group of engineers, and those engineers, 15 of them, signed this email, and they said, please do not make these changes to technology education, because that's where we got our interest in technology. That's where we got our start to be engineers. The very thing the government tells us they want, people in high-value jobs, adding value to the economy. Where does that start? It starts in schools, and that's what's been taken away by this government. The way they have treated the compulsory sector has been absolutely appalling. And wouldn't it have been better if this government had actually sat down and formed a working group with teachers and schools before they made these decisions, rather than afterwards when they've stuffed up and they're trying to backpedal? The problem, Mr. Speaker, is even the backpedaling is not enough, because this reduction in the number of teachers in schools will damage the educational future of New Zealanders. There is no need, Mr. Speaker, for this to be a zero-sum game, and I want to repeat the commitment that David Shearer made earlier this week. Labor in government will reverse these class size changes. We will reverse these because we think it's important that every child, wherever they are from, gets the same opportunities, and we are not going to put in place a regime that will see class sizes increase. Mr. Speaker, in the tertiary education area, we have seen some bizarre changes. And I want to make the point that the proposal to completely abolish student allowances for postgraduate study for Masters and PhD students was not in the National Party manifesto. There was absolutely no indication that this was what the government was going to do. There were some indications they were going to raid the loan scheme and change that around, but no indication whatsoever that there would be these cuts to student allowances. Mr. Speaker, student allowances go to people from low and modest income backgrounds. They are provided because people from those backgrounds will struggle to undertake tertiary study without that support. And in the House this week, we've had Stephen Joyce get up and say, and John Key, it's relatively similar, the amounts that are going to be got by those who now will have to borrow from the loan scheme. Well, I want to tell Mr. Key and Mr. Joyce about a 24-year-old single mother who's trying to complete her master's degree here in Wellington. And she, at the moment, receives just on $353 a week to be able to support her and her child while studying to do her master's. Under the scheme that is now being put forward, she will lose close to $140 a week from what she gets. She simply will not be able to carry on and finish her postgraduate study. She will not be able to achieve her potential. And that is what this government is responsible for. They are responsible for taking away potential from people. I want to send a message to this government. Stop doing this. Stop taking away opportunity from people. Stop making sure that people can't achieve their potential. Make sure you invest in education. Mr. Speaker, the Labor Party sees education as a priority. It's fundamental to the health and well-being of our society and the success of our children, and it's the key driver in creating a prosperous and growing economy. When Labor is in government, we will invest in education. When Labor is in government, we will ensure that we actually use a budget to address the issues that are fundamental to our economy. Let's get monetary policy right. Let's actually support exporters. Let's make sure superannuation is sustainable for the future. And let's actually make the tax system fair and balanced so that everybody pays their fair share. And let's invest in education. That's what a Labor government would do. This government is failing the future of New Zealand.
I call the Honourable Minister Phil Heatley to